video that you just watched was a video of my model Dana. She's properly throwing a football with a couple different angles and views. I choose to do the slow-mo videos of her so the viewers can see the movement broken down slowly before I completely describe it. As you can see, I am doing the football throw as my movement. This specific extremity I will be using is the shoulder and the elbow, but I will explain a little of each part of the body in the general description first. Since this movement involves specific gross motor skills, in order to do it correctly, the motor development level is approximately 6th grade. A person can, however, teach a younger child to develop this overall skill, but the normal age range to learn how to correctly throw a football is in the middle school range. In the next 15 to 20 minutes, I will be talking about the different kinesthetic movements that go along with throwing a football, the muscles attached to those movements, and the stages of throwing a football. Also, a detailed description of the shoulder and elbow I will give. At the end of the video, there will be practice cues and a summary to reiterate the information that I mentioned throughout the entirety of the video. Alright, I will now begin the football throw in the general description portion and giving an insight on a couple movements in each part of the body. My model here is going to pretend she just caught a ball. This is typically the starting position for the quarterback as they start the play. So she catches the ball to start. There we go. There are 2 articles that go in depth about movements, which are the author named Kelly describing mechanical movements in a throw and Physiopedia describing throwing biomechanics. My model is going to be going through the motions as described in the article. So to begin, the starting phase of the football throw is called the early cocking phase. The body starts with the feet being planted and the shoulders internally rotating. So this is the overall start. The shoulders reach maximal shoulder abduction with elbow flexion. Physiopedia explains how the hips are being extended and abducting to allow for the body to move forward. The forward movement also includes a knee flexion, and another article by Onkist about muscles in a football throw states how abdominal obliques are often forgotten in the stage and promote power and stability in the throw. They allow the overall weight transfer as well as they are being flexed. The second phase is called the late cocking phase of the throw by Kelly again by describing the full shoulder abduction while there is a movement to maximal external rotation. The elbow is in flexion, getting ready to start extension. This also has an abdominal obliques flexed right here. and the foot that is a plantar flexion, which is going down. I know you can't see that. Is going down to getting ready to throw the ball. Physiopedia also explains how the trunk is reaching maximal rotation and the hip extensors and the knee flexors are being used to pivot the legs forward. The third stage is acceleration, which is also described in Kelly's article. This is when the shoulder enables a full rotation going through and the trunk rotates and legs also for power, an extension of the elbow, and flexion of the wrist and fingers towards the end. The final stage is the follow-through, which is mainly in the arms when the elbow is in fully extended. Kelly explains how the hand is now pronated, which is going down, and the shoulder is in abduction going up, and the wrist is flexed overall. The body then begins to relax after the full power of the throw. So if you can do the whole motion real quick. Okay. I will go through these stages again in my detailed description in a more detailed fashion for the shoulder and the elbow joint. I just wanted to give a general description over each stage and the whole body. The football throw uses the whole body, which most people would not believe. So now that I went through the general description with my model, I'm going to talk about a few other details about the football throw. In McDonald's article on the principle of throwing a football, he mentions how the plane that is used for the football throw is primarily the sagittal plane. This is the plane that separates the body in left and right halves. This plane has flexion and extension movements, which directly relate to the football throw. This means the body also rotates around the sagittal axis. Stefan, in another article about movement analysis, states the football throw also occurs in the frontal plane and the axis, as the arm goes from behind the body to the front. As the viewers could see, In the first slow motion video, the weight or the mass shifts while throwing the football from leaning back to the front or the optimal power of the throw. An article on Cisco athletics over balance and football explains how important it is to maintain equilibrium in football and to make sure the athlete has stability and balance throughout the throw. On the website of Physics Classroom about athletics, state how the football throw is specifically a circular motion, much like other sports. This is because it contains rotation and circular motions, and it can contain other motions occasionally, but this is the main type of motion, a circular motion. Now I'm going to begin the detailed description portion. The joints I chose to go in depth about during a football throw would be the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint and the elbow joint here. As I stated previously, I will be going more in depth with each phase of a football throw and repeat those again. The information I used in each motion was in an article about football by Kelly, a website called Sports Rec about muscles, as well as an article about the motions by Stefan. To reiterate, the 4 stages of the football throw are early cocking, late cocking, acceleration, and follow through, which we already talked about. To begin, the first stage is early cocking. When the non-dominant shoulder, once she gets the ball, I guess, when the non-dominant shoulder starts into internal rotation, when she catches and turns, and the dominant shoulder reaches maximum abduction, while both elbows begin to go into flexion here. While the shoulder is abducted and internally rotating, the main muscles used are the deltoids, the subscapularis, the pectoralis major, and the teres major, which I will point out and describe. The prime movers, or the agonists in this movement of the shoulder abduction, are the deltoids, the anterior deltoid, the middle deltoid, and the posterior deltoid, while the pec major and lats act as the antagonists. The pec major here and the lats along here work to slow down the movement. So during internal rotation, over here and here, the agonists are the teres major, which over here would be back here, and the subscapularis over here, and again, the pec major in the front. The antagonist in the shoulder movement is the posterior deltoid, which we talked about is back here. And the elbow during this movement is almost in full flexion. See here. Using the biceps brachii, the brachioradialis, and the pronator teres down here. They're all right along here. All these muscles are used as the prime movers, and the triceps on the back side here can be the antagonist during elbow flexion. The second movement that we'll be talking about is the late cocking stage, which uses the shoulder and the elbow mostly. The dominant shoulder, which should be Dana's right shoulder, is abducting, again, raising up, and externally rotating using the deltoids, the subscapularis, and the teres major, or minor, and the subscapularis to begin her up motion. The same muscles are being used for abduction. However, during external rotation, the prime movers are the infraspinatus, the deltoids, the teres minor, which I already mentioned, while the antagonists are the supraspinatus and the teres major. The elbow is still in flexion, which uses the same muscles as previously stated. The next motion is the acceleration stage. During this stage, the dominant shoulder is in flexion, flexed out, and internal rotation, just like the first stage, going back into the same muscles. However, the elbow is changing into extension instead of flexion and pronation. So her elbow is now extended and she's in pronation a little bit. And during the pronation stage, we'll use the ulnohumeral and the radioulnar joints here, both sides. And for extension, the prime movers are the triceps, back here, the brachii, and the ankylus over here. The antagonist in elbow flexion would be the bicep muscle to slow down the movement overall. The last stage of the football throw is the follow through, once she lets go of the ball. I guess she doesn't have to right now. This is when the person has let go of the ball and the eccentric movements come into play to allow the body to rebalance herself. As she goes through, her body is to come back eccentrically to slow down and retain balance. Most of the movement in the follow through is from her shoulder. The glenohumeral joint, which we talked about is up here, is now going from full flexion into horizontal adduction. So we're horizontally adducting. The muscles being used as the prime movers in this movement are the pec major, which we mentioned earlier here, and the coracobrachialis over here. The anterior deltoid assists in flexion of the shoulder and acts as the antagonist of the shoulder is adducting. The elbow is still extended using the triceps and the ankylus. The biceps is the antagonist still in this movement, slowing it all down. Now that I went through the agonist and the antagonist, I will now be talking about the type of lever the football throw is. As described in the Biomechanical Principles article, it mentions how the bones of your body are levers that allow you to perform many skills. The author describes a third-class lever as, in quotes, the air force is applied is between the weight or resistance and the fulcrum. During a football throw, the most common type of lever is used throughout the shoulder and elbow joints. This lever is called a third-class lever. And a third-class lever allows your body to do fast movements such as throwing or kicking, which is obviously what we're doing. The specific movements I chose involve throwing a football overhand, the humerus, ulna, and radius, all on her right arm. Move as upper and lower arm levers to push the force of the football as the body moves through the 4 stages. So overall, it's pushing through. The wrist or hand is the last lever to be used as the ball is being released during the follow-through phase. There are 2 pivot points during a football throw for a third-class lever, and that is the elbow and the shoulder. As a person practices more and uses this lever during a football throw, there will be more speed and force applied over time to the throw. An article about throwing biomechanics on the Physiopedia website explains the different muscles involved during the throw. We start in early cocking phase again, and the main muscles firing during its movement are the supraspinatus and the deltoids. They work together during this movement to allow the shoulder to begin abducting. As we move into the late cocking phase, more muscles begin firing. The serratus anterior and pec major play a huge role and begin the external rotation process. The infraspinatus and the teres minor begin to fire to allow for maximal external rotation. While those muscles are contracting concentrically, the subscapularis is working eccentrically to allow lateral rotation of the arm. The elbow is now moving upward into flexion using the biceps brachii. Next is the acceleration phase. For the shoulder, there are quite a few muscles being used. To start this phase, the serratus anterior and pec major are continuing to be firing as the arm goes into horizontal flexion and allows the scapula to retract using the traps. The lats then activate to allow for maximal external rotation to begin, internal rotation into the next phase. The subscapularis is then activated to move the arm into internal rotation to give the overall power to throw. As the shoulder begins the internal rotation, the elbow goes into harsh extension using the triceps brachii. The last phase is followed through, which activates any muscle firing anymore and is allowing for the body to rebound and relax for the next motion needed. Before I begin talking about my specific recommendations for practice cues, I would like to mention how important it is to keep the proper technique and form when throwing a football. Zarmeski mentions in his article about sports injuries that the shoulder is the most common location for an injury when throwing. He continues to explain how in the U.S. there are 2.1 million high schools that get injured while overhand throwing. When the article mentions that football specifically, the author explains how when the shoulder rotates, some people do not have the proper technique and can overthrow. This is resulting in a rotator cuff tear. The article also mentions bicep tendonitis from overuse of the shoulder or can be caused from dislocation of the shoulder. In order to avoid these injuries, it is important to maintain the proper form and technique during a throw. I'm going to mention a couple of my own tips and tricks that follow the throw. My 5 practice cues consist of keeping your shoulder towards the target for overall accuracy while throwing to the target. Making a T with your body. Making a T with your body will maintain balance while performing the throw. Making an L with your throwing arm or dominant arm. Making an L with your arm is important for momentum of the throw. And full extension of the elbow is good for power and accuracy again. Making sure you follow through on the elbow and shoulder and wrist are for accuracy and power. So for a rubric that I have here, I have criteria of a grading scale of 1, 2, and 3. 1 is needing improvement, 2 is an average score that can be improved, and 3 is an advanced movement overall. So my first portion when talking about a rubric is the range of motion of the shoulders. To receive a 1, which is we're trying to get better, the student has little to no range of motion of the shoulder, and the abduction is only 1/4 during the movement. For a 2, as an average, we have average range of motion of the shoulder, and the shoulder abduction is 2 out of 4th, so we're halfway there, we're getting closer. And for an advanced movement for a 3 on the score, it is perfect to advanced skills of range of motion of the shoulder, and the shoulder abduction is 3/4 or full during the movements. The next step we have is the angle of the elbow. So for a 1, a student would be, the elbow reaches 90 degrees, but does not allow for full follow through. The throw cannot exceed acceptable limit and needs assistance with the technique. For our average score, the elbow reaches 135 degrees of throw and has some power, but an improper form has been used and could use some minor teaching skills to help. And for a full score, the elbow completes 180 degrees and allows for full follow through with the power throws. The proper technique is also used during this portion. So for the third portion, we have the overall power of the throw. For a 1, a student can get a 1 by not executing proper technique and not enough power. There would be no elbow extension and the shoulders do not abduct, and the student would not end up turning towards their target. So for an average score, the student would show improvement on their technique and has a mediocre throw. They would have average elbow extension and minimal shoulder abduction, and they would turn slightly towards their target but not full. And for a full score, a student would have proper technique and can throw powerfully. The full elbow extension would be happening, and they would rotate their shoulders to meet towards their target. And the last step in our rubric for a student would be finding the target. So for a 1, a student does not meet the target and completely misses and hips facing the wrong direction. For a 2 or an average score, the student would barely meet the target and goes to the side or above the intended spot. So that also the hips would be slightly crooked. And for a perfect score, the student would meet the target and hit the correct spot on the target with their hips lined up where they're supposed to go. The chart that was described was created to grade the throw of a beginner who is learning how to throw a football. It can be used to help the teacher or coach learn where the children need improvement and work on throughout the football lesson. This assessment can be used on middle schoolers and high schoolers in practice, and it can be a great baseline for the students and be reassessed after the lesson. To conclude, during the explanation of the football throw, I am sure as a viewer it was intriguing to see how much exactly goes into a simple football movement. A football throw executes a lot of different muscles, joints, and movements. The more you practice a football throw, the more muscle memory will come to you and the more force the throw can be. I hope you guys learned about the 4 stages, what muscles are being used, especially in the shoulder and elbow, and can have fun while practicing this skill.